Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andrea Palmeter, and I am a senior data analyst here at WSHA, and I'm also the project manager for the new quality benchmarking system that we've launched. So thanks for joining me today to learn a little bit more about our new system. We launched the system over the last few months to transition into using a much more user-friendly site for the data submissions you do to submit data to us here at WSHA, and I hope that you'll find it a lot easier to use, and it'll make your submission process a lot easier. As you probably know from the email that I sent out and letting you know about this training, this is the first in a series of 3 that we've offered to make sure that you know all about all of the features. So today we're going to focus on data submission, how you get data into us. The second one, which is being offered next week, looks at some of the charts and analytics functions that are built into QBS. And then the third training looks at our administrator functions, so managing your users within your hospital, as well as creating locations within your hospital for measures that track that level of detail. This is a site that we use for our HIN work with our patient safety work with CMS, as well as our safe deliveries. And is for our Medicaid Quality Incentive Program. So you may have been logged into your hospital's account and seen the measures that you report to us, as well as some that you may be less familiar with. That it may be because someone else within your hospital reports other measures to us through this system, and those are there for them. If you think something is in your account in error, please let us know, and we'll either let you know it's for another program that maybe you don't work with, or, oh, we do receive that from a third party, or maybe it's not applicable to your website or to your hospital, and we can then take that out of your account. So please keep an eye on that as you log in. Just as a matter of functionality for today's webinar, I have everyone's lines muted, but we do have a chat function within the webinar today. So if you have any questions and want to jump in, just type that into the chat function, and I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go and answer those as we talk. And then I'll open up the phone lines at the end if you want to sort of dig into something a little bit more complex. We can talk about it at the end of the half-hour training here. So let's go ahead and dig into any of the content here. To start with, this is the landing page. It's qbs.wsha.org. We're no longer working with our One Health Port site that we've been working with for about 10 years. So you'll go here to log in, and if you don't have an account, or one of your colleagues doesn't have an account, you can use this request access function, and it'll allow you to fill out a form to let us know that you need access, and we will get you set up. As we'll discuss in the third training, the administrator training, once you have an administrator at your hospital, that person can then set up new accounts for other people as well. However, for today's training, I'm actually going to be working in our testing site. So I'm going to jump over here, and you'll notice the URL is a little bit different, and it says this is the staging site. The production site is available at qbs.wsha.org. You'll see that throughout this because I'm going to be putting some fake data in here as part of this training. So we didn't want to have that in the real system. So for today's training, we'll be looking at the testing site that we work with. And one other thing is that if you have any follow-up questions after this, please feel free to reach out to us. At the end of this training, I'm going to drop my personal email and the support for QBS into our chat box so that you can send follow-up messages if you have any questions about the system. So what we're looking at right now is the landing page if you are a person who works with more than one hospital. You can see I have 3 sample hospitals listed here and a summary of their data submission status. So what this tells me is what my data submission looks like at these various hospitals, and there's a couple different things for each month. We can see for hospital 3, when I hover over any of these months, it says not submitted. I have these hollow circles. We're going to do some data submission for hospital number 3 as part of this training today. Now up here, hospital number 2, if I hover over it, I have these nice green check marks. And that means that I have submitted all of the data that I'm responsible for that month for that hospital. Now, you notice some of these check marks aren't green, they're brown or kind of blackish, depending upon your screen. If I hover over this, it says submitted with warnings. What that means is that there was something about at least one data point submitted that month that was flagged as some kind of issue. We'll look at what some of those warnings might be when we do some data entry today. But you'll get, if something seems a little bit non-standard, you'll get one of those warnings. And then finally, you see that some of these aren't check marks, they're little sort of bullseyes, which means partially submitted. So of all of the measures we're responsible for this month, we've submitted data for some of them, but not all of them. So you're trying to get that green check mark when you've submitted all of your measures for your hospital for that month. You can also say you only work with HIN data, or you only want to look at maybe, have I submitted for all of my hospitals on this ADE measure? I can do a filter and see, okay, for my sample hospital 1, I've got that data point in here for January, but not February, so it's kind of patchy, and this is the one where my warnings were. So if I just want to look at a summary of all of my hospitals where I owe this measure, you'll notice hospital number 2 isn't here, which means I'm not responsible for submitting this measure for that hospital. I can get a quick glance of what it is I need to submit. So let's click into hospital number 3 and do some data submission. Now, if you only work with one hospital, this is what you'll see when you log in. You can see I have my hospital name. We have the charts here, which we'll talk about in training number 2. The details, which just gives me some background information about the way my hospital is set up within QBS. It gives me my QBS ID number, which will typically be your CCN number, the state I'm in, if I'm part of an accountable community of health, if I participate in the HIN, if I'm a critical access hospital, as well as who set up this the hospital. And then finally, we have a data submissions tab, which gives me a little bit more of a calendar view going back a full year of what my data submission status is. But let's go back to the overview tab and kind of walk through what I have here. I have 4 measures, 3 adverse drug event measures around anticoagulant safety, glycemic management, opioid safety, as well as patient falls. I have no data entered for this hospital yet, so my current value shows up as NA. We'll see this get populated as we enter some data. These are the targets, which because this hospital is a HIN participant, this is the target for that program, a 20% below the 2014 baseline. And I can hover over and see that that's what this target that's labeled here is. Period and last updated, once I get some data in here, we'll get to see what that looks like. So in order to enter data, let's use our anticoagulant safety option 1 as my first data point. So I'm going to click into March. And I can just click on this field, and it takes me directly to a form I can use to fill out this measure. So let's say I want, I'm just making up numbers here, but in March 2017, my hospital had 1 patient event out of 5,000 patients. I've got the general description of my numerator and denominator here with a little bit more detail in italics underneath for each field. And if I need even more information than that, I can click on Show Measure Details up here at the top. And I have a URL that will take me to where I can get more information about this specific measure. So I'm going to go ahead and down here and click Save. And now we see that my value shows up here. I get a green check mark for March for having submitted my data. It was updated on September 13th, just now. The most recent period I have data for is March 2017. And my value is below my target. So if I hover over my green arrow, it says I'm below the target on a measure where lower is better. If that weren't the case, it would switch to red, and I would have a red arrow pointing above, indicating that I was above the goal. So let's do something a little bit more complex here. A couple of options we have. Let's say this month I had 2 at 5,200. And I'm going to do save, and we're looking at April. I hit save and next. It takes me to May. Now, suppose that this month I was 3 out of 4,500, but I'm not paying attention, and I hit this. And then I put 4,500. So this number is very large and not what we're going for. If I hit save, it's going to give me an error message. And it tells me that my numerator must be less than or equal to my denominator. So I can't have more patient events than I had patients. It will not let me save this. So let me then edit this. And let's say I'm slightly less absent-minded, but I still try to save this as 333. So my value is now less than my denominator, but that's still a pretty high number. This is what happens when I hit save now. This is going to say some values were outside of the expected range. So my numerator is smaller than my denominator, so I'm allowed to save it. But this is a pretty high number and not really what we'd expect. This is a number that, this is a warning that we set up specifically for training just to kind of flag this. But some of them will have these flags that just say, this doesn't quite seem right. Are you sure? And then you can either say, no, let me review, which will take you right back to that field and let you edit it. Or you can say, yes, these values are correct. This is really what I meant. So I'm going to say that, and we can see what happens. So now we come back to this field. And I see that instead of having a green check mark, I have this brownish check mark. So when I hover over it, it says submitted with warnings. And that's what that warning means, is that the value that I entered for this month was not quite what we expected. And I will mention that 0 over 0 is allowed if for any of these measures you just have no patients for that month. You will be able to say that. Another thing to know is that for a lot of these measures, we have time limits. So if it's more than 6 months old, you won't be able to edit your data. And more than 12 months old, not only will you not be able to edit your data, you won't be able to go back and fill in any blanks that you may have or gaps in your data. If there's an issue that you come across where you'll need to edit data or add new data, that's older than that, please reach out to us and we'll work with you to make those changes. We just don't want to have, we want to have a bit of an audit trail if we have you making changes older than that. So we'd like to be involved in the conversation. So this is one of 2 options that I just showed you for the ways that you can enter data, which is doing that manual data entry, typing it into that form, and saving it. Are there any questions on any part of this process before I show you the other data upload option? Great. I'm going to then go up to the top here, and we have this option that says upload data. Now this takes me to a place that has a lot of information about how we would use an Excel file to upload data for my hospital. Now, you'll remember for the hospital number 3 we were just in, we submitted March, April, and May data, but June, July, and August we haven't done anything with. We haven't submitted any data for any of the other measures. And then, so let's, we have a couple different options here for the way we can download an Excel template, which is what's available on this page. I can either click through and do it one measure at a time, or I can download the full template, and that's where we'll start. So if I download full template, I can open this up. And I get a CSV file of all of the measures I'm responsible for reporting for all of the hospitals that I manage. So let's expand these out. Unfortunately, CSV files don't allow for a lot of formatting, so the columns are a little ugly. So I'm going to expand them out as we talk so we can look at each one. So the QBS identifier is in column A. And what that does is it lets me know which hospital I'm talking about. In this case, it's pretty easy. My hospital number 1 ends with a 1, number 2 ends with a 2, and number 3 ends with a 3. As I mentioned, that's a CCN in most cases. If you're a hospital that has multiple campuses that share a CCN, but you submit data separately, we'll have an A or a B typically on the end of that CCN to differentiate those campuses, and it is listed on that upload data page what the identifier is. So you have this identifier for what hospital we're talking about. We have a location identifier. This is used for measures where we keep track of what unit within the hospital the data came from. In some cases, we may need you to tell us if it was in a particular department, and you'll put that here. For most measures, we don't include that, and so you'll just leave that blank. And within the measure definition, it will tell you if you need an identifier or not. We have here the measure identifier. So this is the topic of the particular data point we want to look in. So you can see here we have ADE anticoagulant safety, option 1, which is the measure we were just looking at. We'll want to fill in the start and end date. And then over here we have the data element identifier, which is my numerator and my denominator for that. These are the exact identifiers that show up in the real site. These are the ones we set up in the testing site, and we changed the name slightly. But basically, everyone will start with something about the overall measure name. The middle section will refer to something about the issue we're getting at. So in this case, warfarin. It might say patient days. It might say falls, but something about the actual content of what the value is that we're talking about here. And then it'll either say numerator or denominator. And then finally, we'll have the value, which is the number for that month. So I'm going to go ahead and fill some of this out so that we can see what a sample might look like. So we'll remember that I don't have any June data submitted yet. So I just need to enter the first and last date of the month. For the month that I'm doing data uploads for. And now it won't let me upload just a numerator or a denominator. I have to do both. So for this month, let's say my numerator was 5, and my denominator was 6,000. Here, just as with the other, with entering in the form, you can't put in negative numbers, you can't put in letters, and the same restrictions apply in terms of things like having numbers that are unexpected but allowed to be saved, as well as having things that you will generate an error, like having a numerator greater than your, or less than your denominator. So let's say I also want to enter my July data this way. I'm going to add 2 empty lines here. And I'm going to copy this. I'm going to change out the dates so that they say July. And make this for both lines. And then I'm going to change out my values. So I'm now adding my anticoagulant safety adverse drug event values. Let's save this for this month. Whoops, and I have my denominator and my numerator reversed, which would be a problem. And that would generate an error for me. So now I can put 2 different months within the same file for the same measure. Let's say I also want to get in one more different measure at this hospital. Let's do this for June, because I hadn't entered any data for this month. Thanks for your patience as I type all these numbers out. And for this, let's say my numerator is 2 out of 100. But maybe I don't have my data for opioid safety and patient falls for my hospital number 3 right now. So I can just delete these lines out. And maybe I don't have anything for my hospital number 1 right now, so I'm going to delete these lines out also. But I can include stuff from a different hospital if, let's say I do June data for everything here. I'm going to put this in for my diabetes and for patient falls. So numerator, for patient falls, let's say I had none out of 50 patients. And then let's say that I had for my diabetes 3 cases out of 100. So we've got multiple measures, multiple time periods, and multiple hospitals all in one file. A key thing to remember is if you're cutting and pasting multiple things together, please make sure your identifier is correct. Please make sure your date is correct. This will actually write over previous month's data if you leave the date in for the last month, for example, as you change out this file. So please be careful about that as you use the file option. One of the reasons we put this file option together is so that you can actually write into it with a script if that's something you want to do, pull from your EHR, have run a program and have it formatted this way so that you can just hit upload. I'm going to save this file. Let's save it to my desktop here. And I'm going to call this September upload. And yes, I do want to save it as a CSV format. That's the only format that QBS will recognize. I also want to mention that QBS will not recognize this if any of the headers are changed. So you want to make sure that your headers read just as they appear here. So I'm going to close out of this, save. Oh, I just did save. Let's try this again. Yes. Yes, I want to keep using that format. Okay. I confused myself a bit there. Apologies. But now, if I go into my upload data page, I choose that file that I formatted. And let's scroll down on my desktop, find my September upload. Let's let it take a minute here to think. And then if I hit upload, it will tell me my file successfully uploaded. This is where I would get errors if I had had any problems, if my numerator had been greater than my denominator, if something was out of range, anything like that, I would get an error here. And if that was the case, none of my data would have uploaded and I would need to edit my file and try again. But I did successfully upload. So let's go back to my hospital number 3. We can now see I got my June and July data uploaded, as well as the June data for my other measure here. So it goes back and I can click in to that form and see those numbers that I entered using that file upload. One other thing I do want to show you, I'm going to go back to the upload data page. And if I wanted more information, if I found, for example, those identifiers confusing, I can click on the anticoagulant safety, and this gives me a lot more information about what I should be entering. This tells me for every column, it gives me a description of what should go in there. It tells me at the bottom here what my numerator description is, what the identifier associated with that is, and then the definition. It also gives me a reference that we had in that form to fill out to go back and look at the definition more in depth. So if you're trying to use a CSV form and you need more information about what you should be filling out, this is your reference point to do so. And of course, we at WSHA are happy to help you if you have any questions come up and want to know more about how to do any of your CSV file formatting. We've been happy to work with hospitals to help them get their files set up. One more thing I did want to point out to you is that this training is being recorded, as are all of our trainings, and they're available as well as a user guide in the support tab within QBS. So go ahead and reference that at any time if you need some more information. I'm going to go back to my homepage here. But if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer those now, or feel free to reach out to us if you have questions as you start to work with this. Great. Well, I'm going to drop my email and the QBS support email address in the chat box here so that if you come up with any questions later, you're welcome to answer them, or you're welcome to send them, and we're happy to answer them. And again, this is going to be something you use for HIN, for MQI, and for your safe deliveries measures. So if any questions about those programs come up, feel free to reach out to us as well. But thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you will find the system very useful, and I hope that you'll join us next week for our trainings 2 and 3 about QBS. Have a great afternoon.